The Enigma of Ravenwood Manor. Chapter 1. The Call to Ravenwood. Detective Evelyn Harper leaned back in her creaky office chair, savoring the rare moment of tranquility. The precinct bustled outside her door, but within the confines of her cluttered office, she found a pocket of peace. Stacks of case files teetered precariously on her desk, each one a testament to the relentless nature of crime in their bustling city. Evelyn's piercing green eyes scanned the room, settling on the faded photograph of her father, a decorated detective himself, that hung on the wall. She wondered, not for the first time, what he would think of her career choice. Following in his footsteps had been both a blessing and a curse, pushing her to excel while constantly reminding her of the legacy she had to live up to. The shrill ring of her phone shattered the silence, causing Evelyn to start. She reached for the receiver, her brow furrowing at the urgency in the caller's voice. "Detective Harper, we have a situation at Ravenwood Manor. Lady Isabella Ravenscroft has been found dead under suspicious circumstances." Evelyn's heart quickened, a mix of anticipation and dread coursing through her veins. Ravenwood Manor was not just any crime scene. It was a place steeped in history and shrouded in mystery. The Ravenscroft family was known throughout the region for their immense wealth and the whispers of dark secrets that seemed to cling to their name like a persistent shadow. "I'm on my way," Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to pump through her system. She grabbed her worn leather jacket from the back of her chair and headed out, her mind already racing with possibilities. The precinct was a hive of activity, but Evelyn navigated through it with practiced ease. As she approached the exit, she caught sight of her partner, Inspector James Donovan, waiting by their unmarked car. James was the yang to her yin, methodical where she was intuitive, by the book where she often followed her gut. His presence was a comforting constant in the unpredictable world they inhabited. "What do we know so far?" Evelyn asked as they slid into the car, the familiar scent of leather and coffee enveloping them. James started the engine, his expression grim. "Not much," he replied, pulling out into the busy street. "The initial report suggests a heart attack, but the housekeeper insists there's more to it. She found Lady Isabella in her study, and there were no signs of forced entry." Evelyn nodded, her mind already piecing together the preliminary information. "A heart attack seems too convenient," she mused, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Especially for someone like Lady Isabella. The Ravenscrofts aren't known for going quietly into the night." As they drove towards the outskirts of the city, the urban landscape gradually gave way to rolling countryside. Ravenwood Manor stood as a stark silhouette against the darkening sky, its Gothic architecture a testament to a bygone era. The imposing structure seemed to loom larger as they approached, its windows like watchful eyes guarding untold secrets. Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine as they pulled up to the grand entrance. She had heard stories about Ravenwood Manor since she was a child. Tales of hidden passages, family curses, and fortunes won and lost. Now, she was about to step into that world, tasked with unraveling what could be the manor's darkest mystery yet. Margaret Lawson, the housekeeper, greeted them at the door. Her face was pale, etched with lines of worry and fear. "Thank you for coming, Detective," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know something's not right." Lady Isabella was healthy, and she had no history of heart problems. Evelyn nodded, her keen eyes already taking in every detail of the grand foyer. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Mrs. Lawson," she assured the distraught woman. "Can you show us to the study?" As they followed Margaret through the winding corridors of Ravenwood Manor, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Portraits of stern-faced Ravenscrofts lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow their progress. The air was heavy with the weight of history and the faint scent of something Evelyn couldn't quite place. The study door loomed before them, closed and imposing. Margaret hesitated for a moment before turning the ornate handle, as if dreading what lay beyond. As the door swung open, Evelyn steeled herself for what she might find. Lady Isabella's body lay slumped over her massive oak desk, her silver hair fanned out around her. The room was immaculate, showing no signs of a struggle. Evelyn's eyes darted around, taking in every detail: the half-finished letter on the desk, the open window letting in a cool breeze and the faint, almost imperceptible scent that hung in the air. "James," Evelyn said softly, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Do you smell that?" James sniffed the air, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Almonds?" he questioned, a note of concern in his voice. Evelyn nodded, her suspicions growing. "It could be cyanide," she said, her voice low to avoid alarming Margaret. "We need to get a sample to the lab for confirmation. In the meantime, let's talk to the family and staff. Something tells me there's more to Lady Isabella's death than meets the eye." As they began their investigation, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something far more complex than a simple case of natural death. The walls of Ravenwood Manor seemed to whisper with secrets, and she was determined to uncover them all, no matter where the trail might lead. Chapter 2. The Ravenscroft Family. The grand parlor of Ravenwood Manor was a study in opulence, with its high ceilings, ornate furnishings, and the unmistakable air of old money. It was here that Evelyn and James found themselves face to face with Thomas Ravenscroft, Lady Isabella's estranged brother. Thomas cut a striking figure, his silver hair and sharp features a testament to the Ravenscroft lineage. Yet, as he paced before the grand fireplace, Evelyn noted the slight tremor in his hands and the haunted look in his eyes. "Mr. Ravenscroft," Evelyn began, her voice gentle but firm, "we understand you and Lady Isabella had been estranged for some time. Can you tell us about your relationship?" Thomas stopped his pacing, turning to face the detectives with a pained expression. "I hadn't spoken to Isabella in years," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "We had our differences, but I never wanted this. Please, find out what happened to her." Evelyn leaned forward, her green eyes intent on Thomas's face. "What kind of differences are we talking about, Mr. Ravenscroft?" Thomas sighed heavily, sinking into a nearby armchair. "It was about the family business, mostly. Isabella always had a head for numbers, for strategy. Father left her in charge, and I didn't take it well. We argued, said things we couldn't take back. And then, silence. Years of it." James jotted down notes, his pen scratching softly against his notepad. "When was the last time you saw or spoke to your sister?" "5 years ago, at our mother's funeral," Thomas replied, his gaze distant. "We barely exchanged 2 words. I always thought there'd be time to make amends, to bridge the gap between us. And now—" His voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Evelyn nodded sympathetically, but her mind was racing. Family estrangement, business disputes. These were classic motives for foul play. Yet Thomas's grief seemed genuine. She filed away her observations, knowing that in cases like these, nothing could be taken at face value. As they concluded their interview with Thomas, the parlor door burst open, revealing a young woman with fiery red hair and a rebellious glint in her eye. Emily Ravenscroft, Isabella's niece, strode into the room with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her life. "Are you the detectives?" she demanded, her gaze sweeping over Evelyn and James. "About time someone showed up to sort out this mess." Evelyn stood, extending her hand. "Detective Evelyn Harper, and this is Inspector James Donovan. You must be Emily Ravenscroft." Emily ignored the outstretched hand, instead flopping dramatically onto a nearby chaise lounge. "Let me guess, you want to know where I was when dear Aunt Isabella kicked the bucket?" James cleared his throat, clearly taken aback by Emily's cavalier attitude. "Miss Ravenscroft, we understand this must be a difficult time." "Difficult?" Emily scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Aunt Isabella was always so controlling. She never let me live my life the way I wanted. But I didn't kill her, if that's what you're thinking. I was out at a club last night. Ask anyone. Can you tell us about your relationship with your aunt?" she probed. Emily sighed dramatically. "It was always about the family name, the family business. A Ravenscroft must act with decorum, Emily. A Ravenscroft must uphold tradition, Emily. It was suffocating. I just wanted to live my own life, make my own choices. Is that so wrong?" As Emily spoke, Evelyn noticed a flicker of something, guilt, fear, pass across her face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the mask of indifference, but it was enough to pique Evelyn's interest. "And now that Lady Isabella is gone?" James asked, his pen poised over his notepad. Emily's gaze hardened. "Now? Now I suppose I'll finally be free to live as I please. Is that what you want to hear, Inspector? That I'm glad she's dead? Because I'm not. I just wish things had been different between us." As they wrapped up their interview with Emily, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that the young woman was hiding something. Whether it was related to Isabella's death or not remained to be seen, but it was clear that the Ravenscroft family was a tangled web of conflicting emotions and hidden agendas. Their final interview of the day was with Margaret Lawson, the housekeeper who had been with the Ravenscroft family for over 3 decades. They found her in the kitchen, methodically polishing silver as if trying to bring order to a world suddenly thrown into chaos. "Mrs. Lawson," Evelyn said gently, taking a seat at the large wooden table, "we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Can you tell us about the events leading up to Lady Isabella's death?" Margaret set down the silver pitcher she had been polishing, her hands shaking slightly. "Lady Isabella was in good spirits yesterday," she began, her voice soft but steady. "She spent most of the day in her study, working on some papers. I brought her tea in the afternoon, as I always do. She seemed preoccupied, but not unwell." "Did she mention any concerns to you?" James asked. "Any worries about her health or safety?" Margaret shook her head firmly. "No, nothing like that. Lady Isabella was a strong woman, detective. She wouldn't just die like that. There has to be something more." Evelyn leaned forward, her gaze intent. "Mrs. Lawson, in all your years with the family, have you ever noticed anything unusual? Any tensions or conflicts that might be relevant to our investigation?" The housekeeper hesitated, her eyes darting nervously around the kitchen. "Well," she began, lowering her voice, "there have been rumors about a family treasure hidden somewhere in the manor. Lady Isabella never spoke of it, but I've overheard arguments, whispers. Some say it's why Mr. Thomas and Lady Isabella fell out." Evelyn and James exchanged a glance. A hidden treasure could certainly be motive for murder, especially in a family with as much history as the Ravenscrofts. "One more thing," Margaret added, her voice barely above a whisper. "Last night, after I found Lady Isabella, I could have sworn I heard footsteps in the old wing of the manor, but when I went to look, there was no one there." As they left the kitchen, Evelyn's mind was whirling with possibilities. The scent of almonds, family tensions, rumors of hidden treasure, and mysterious footsteps. It all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple heart attack. "What do you think, James?" she asked as they made their way back to the foyer. James shook his head, his expression troubled. "I think we've only scratched the surface, Evelyn. This family has more secrets than the manor has rooms, and I have a feeling we're in for a long and complicated investigation." Evelyn nodded, her determination growing with each step. "Then we'd better get to work. Something tells me the answers we're looking for are hidden within these walls, and I intend to find them." As night fell over Ravenwood Manor, casting long shadows across the grounds, Evelyn and James prepared to delve deeper into the mystery that had brought them there. Little did they know that their investigation was about to take a turn into the darkest corners of the Ravenscroft family history, where long-buried secrets were waiting to be unearthed. Chapter 3: The Hidden Passage. The next morning dawned gray and misty, as if Ravenwood Manor itself was shrouded in secrecy. Evelyn and James arrived early, determined to conduct a thorough search of the premises. They started in Lady Isabella's study, meticulously combing through every drawer, book, and paper. "There has to be something here," Evelyn muttered, her frustration growing as the hours ticked by with no significant discoveries. A woman like Lady Isabella, with all her secrets, she must have left some clue. James, who had been examining the bookshelf, suddenly paused. "Evelyn," he called, his voice tinged with excitement, "come look at this." Evelyn hurried over, watching as James ran his hand along the edge of the bookshelf. With a soft click, a section of the shelf swung inward, revealing a dark passage beyond. "A hidden passage," Evelyn breathed, her heart racing. James, this could be the break we've been looking for. They exchanged a look of determination before Evelyn pulled out her flashlight and stepped into the darkness. The passage was narrow and damp, cobwebs clinging to the stone walls. Their footsteps echoed ominously as they made their way deeper into the unknown. "This must lead somewhere," James said, his voice hushed in the confines of the secret corridor. After what felt like an eternity of twists and turns, the passage opened up into a larger space. Evelyn's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing rows of ancient coffins and dust-covered relics. "It's some kind of family crypt," Evelyn realized, her voice filled with awe and a touch of unease. As they carefully made their way through the crypt, examining the centuries-old tombstones and artifacts, Evelyn's light caught on something out of place. A small, ornate chest tucked away in a corner. "James, look at this," she called, kneeling down to examine the chest. With gloved hands, she carefully opened it, revealing a stack of yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. "These look old," James observed, peering over her shoulder. "Maybe from the 19th century?" Evelyn nodded, gently untying the ribbon and unfolding the first letter. As she read, her eyes widened. "James, these are from a long-lost Ravenscroft family member. They talk about a hidden family treasure and a curse?" James frowned, taking one of the letters to examine himself. "A curse? That sounds like something out of a Gothic novel." "Maybe," Evelyn agreed. "But remember what Margaret said about rumors of a family treasure? These letters could be the key to understanding what happened to Lady Isabella." As they pored over the letters, a picture began to emerge of a family torn apart by greed and superstition. The long-lost Ravenscroft wrote of a treasure hidden within the manor, protected by a curse that would bring ruin to any family member who sought it out of selfish desire. "This is big, James," Evelyn said, her voice echoing in the cavernous crypt. "If these letters are genuine, they could provide a motive for Lady Isabella's murder." James nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. But who knew about this hidden passage in the family crypt? And more importantly, who knew about these letters? Evelyn carefully placed the letters back in the chest, her mind racing. "We need to keep this discovery under wraps for now. Let's take the chest back to the station for further analysis. In the meantime, we should look into the family history more deeply." As they made their way back through the hidden passage, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, and she quickened her pace. "James," she whispered, "do you get the feeling we're not alone down here?" Before James could respond, they heard a faint sound echoing through the passage, footsteps hurrying away from them. "Someone's here," Evelyn exclaimed, breaking into a run. James followed close behind, their flashlights bouncing wildly off the stone walls as they gave chase. They burst out of the hidden entrance in the study, just in time to see a shadowy figure disappearing through the door. Without hesitation, Evelyn sprinted after the intruder, her heart pounding in her chest. The chase led them through the winding corridors of Ravenwood Manor, past startled staff members and priceless antiques. Evelyn caught glimpses of their quarry, a tall figure dressed in dark clothing, moving with surprising agility. As they rounded a corner into the grand foyer, Evelyn saw their chance. "James, cut them off at the side entrance," she shouted, veering to the right to block the main door. With a burst of speed, Evelyn lunged forward, tackling the figure just as they reached for the door handle. They tumbled to the ground in a tangle of limbs, Evelyn struggling to maintain her grip on the surprisingly strong intruder. James arrived seconds later, helping to subdue the person. As they rolled the figure over, Evelyn found herself staring into the defiant eyes of Emily Ravenscroft. "Emily?" Evelyn gasped, surprise evident in her voice. "What were you doing in that passage?" Emily glared at them, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. "I could ask you the same thing," she spat. "Snooping around in our family's private areas. You had no right." Evelyn and James exchanged a look. This was an unexpected development, and it raised even more questions about the Ravenscroft family and their secrets. "I think it's time we had another chat, Emily," Evelyn said firmly, helping the young woman to her feet. "And this time, I want the truth." Chapter 4. unraveling threads. In the Manor's drawing room, Emily sat rigidly on an antique settee, her earlier bravado replaced by nervous energy. Evelyn and James sat across from her, their expressions stern. "Emily," Evelyn began, her voice calm but authoritative, "we need to know what you were doing in that hidden passage. It's crucial to our investigation." Emily's eyes darted around the room, as if seeking an escape. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I was looking for proof," she admitted. "Proof of what?" James pressed. "Of the family treasure," Emily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've heard the stories all my life, whispers about a fortune hidden somewhere in the manor. Aunt Isabella always dismissed them as fairy tales, but I knew there had to be some truth to it." Evelyn leaned forward, her interest piqued. "And did you find anything?" Emily shook her head. "No, nothing concrete, but I've been exploring the hidden passages for months now. I thought if I could find the treasure, I could finally break free from this place, from the Ravenscroft name." "Did Lady Isabella know about your explorations?" James asked. A flicker of guilt passed over Emily's face. "I don't think so. At least, she never said anything. But sometimes I felt like she was watching me, like she knew more than she let on." Evelyn's mind was racing, connecting the dots. "Emily, where were you really the night your aunt died?" The young woman's facade crumbled, tears welling up in her eyes. "I was here, in the manor," she confessed. "I had planned another exploration of the passages. But when I heard Aunt Isabella in her study, I hid. I overheard her talking to someone on the phone. She sounded angry, scared even. I've never heard her like that before." "Did you hear what the conversation was about?" Evelyn pressed. Emily shook her head. "Not clearly. Something about time running out and they're coming for it. I didn't understand, but it frightened me. I ran back to my room and stayed there all night. When I heard about her death the next morning, I was too scared to tell anyone what I'd heard." Evelyn and James exchanged a significant look. This was a major breakthrough, but it also complicated their investigation considerably. "Thank you for telling us the truth, Emily," Evelyn said gently. "We'll need you to write down everything you remember about that night, including the exact words you heard if possible." As Emily nodded tearfully, the door to the drawing room burst open. Thomas Ravenscroft stood there, his face a mask of fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Why are you interrogating my niece?" Evelyn stood, her posture calm but firm. "Mr. Ravenscroft, we're conducting a murder investigation. Everyone in this house is a potential witness or suspect." Thomas blanched at her words. "Murder? But I thought Isabella died of a heart attack." "New evidence has come to light," James explained, standing beside Evelyn. "We have reason to believe Lady Isabella's death was not natural." The color drained from Thomas's face. He stumbled to a nearby chair, sinking into it heavily. "This can't be happening," he muttered, more to himself than to the others in the room. Evelyn's instincts were on high alert. Thomas's reaction seemed genuine, but something about it nagged at her. She was about to question him further when a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Margaret Lawson appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. "Detective Harper," she said urgently, "Dr. Henry Clark is here. He says he has important information about Lady Isabella's death." Evelyn nodded, her mind already shifting gears. "Show him in, Mrs. Lawson. It seems our investigation is about to take another turn." As they waited for the doctor to join them, Evelyn couldn't help but feel that they were on the verge of a major breakthrough. The hidden passages, the family treasure, the overheard conversation. All of it was coming together to paint a picture of intrigue and danger that went far beyond what she had initially imagined. Little did she know that Dr. Clark's revelation was about to blow the case wide open, setting in motion a chain of events that would shake Ravenwood Manor to its very foundations. Chapter 5. The Poison Revelation. Dr. Henry Clark entered the drawing room, his normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. He clutched a manila folder in his trembling hands, his eyes darting nervously between the occupants of the room. "Dr. Clark," Evelyn greeted him, gesturing for him to take a seat. I understand you have some information for us regarding Lady Isabella's death? The doctor nodded, sinking into an armchair. He opened the folder, pulling out a report. I'm afraid your suspicions were correct, detective, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lady Isabella was poisoned. A collective gasp filled the room. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, while Thomas leaned forward, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Poisoned? James repeated, his pen poised over his notepad. What kind of poison, doctor? Dr. Clark swallowed hard before answering. Cyanide. The toxicology report confirms it. The levels in her system were far too high to be accidental. Evelyn's mind raced back to the faint scent of almonds she had detected in Isabella's study. Her instincts had been right. How was it administered? She asked. Most likely orally, Dr. Clark replied. Perhaps in her evening tea or a late-night drink. The onset would have been rapid, leaving little time for her to call for help. Thomas stood abruptly, his face pale. This is preposterous. Who would want to poison Isabella? Evelyn turned to face him, her gaze steady. That's what we intend to find out, Mr. Ravenscroft. Now, I'm afraid we'll need to ask everyone to remain in the manor while we continue our investigation. This is now officially a murder inquiry. As if on cue, Emily burst into tears, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. Margaret, who had been hovering near the door, rushed to comfort her. James, Evelyn said quietly, we need to secure the crime scene and call for backup. We'll need to interview everyone again, this time with the knowledge that we're dealing with murder. James nodded, already pulling out his phone to make the necessary calls. Evelyn addressed the room once more. I know this is a difficult time for all of you, but I need your full cooperation. Anyone with information about Lady Isabella's final hours needs to come forward. Even the smallest detail could be crucial. As the room buzzed with shocked whispers and muffled sobs, Evelyn's mind was already piecing together the puzzle. The hidden passages, the family treasure, the overheard conversation, and now poison. It all pointed to a carefully planned murder. But who had the motive and opportunity to carry out such a heinous act? And how did it all tie into the Ravenscroft family's mysterious past? Chapter 6. Shadows and Suspects. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Additional police officers arrived, securing the manor and beginning a thorough search of the premises. Evelyn and James set up a makeshift incident room in the library, pinning up photos and notes on a large corkboard. As they reviewed the evidence, a knock on the door interrupted their discussion. It was Arthur Bennett, the mysterious stranger who had been staying at the manor. Detectives, he said, his voice low and urgent. I think there's something you need to know. Evelyn gestured for him to enter, her interest piqued. Mr. Bennett, we were planning to speak with you. What can you tell us? Arthur closed the door behind him, his eyes darting nervously around the room. I haven't been entirely truthful about my presence here, he admitted. I'm not just a guest of the family. I'm a private investigator. James raised an eyebrow. A private investigator? Hired by whom? By Thomas Ravenscroft, Arthur replied. He hired me to find the hidden family treasure. But I swear, I had no idea it would lead to murder. I was just following the trail of clues, trying to uncover the truth about the Ravenscroft fortune. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And what have you uncovered, Mr. Bennett? Arthur hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. I found this hidden in a secret compartment in Lady Isabella's desk. It details the location of the treasure, but also speaks of a family curse. According to this, anyone who seeks the treasure out of greed will meet a terrible fate. As Evelyn took the journal, her mind whirling with this new information, a commotion outside caught their attention. They rushed to the window to see Emily Ravenscroft attempting to flee the manor, a large bag slung over her shoulder. James, stop her! Evelyn shouted, already running for the door. They raced through the manor and out onto the grounds, where two officers had managed to apprehend Emily. As they approached, Evelyn could see the young woman's face was a mixture of fear and defiance. Emily, what were you thinking? Evelyn demanded, slightly out of breath. I can't stay here, Emily cried, struggling against the officer's grip. This place is cursed. Aunt Isabella is dead, and we'll all be next if we don't leave. James stepped forward, gently taking the bag from Emily's shoulder. He opened it, revealing a collection of valuable family heirlooms and jewelry. Emily, he said softly, were you planning to sell these? Emily's defiance crumbled, and she broke down in tears. I just wanted to get away from this place and start a new life. Aunt Isabella was so controlling, and I felt trapped. But I didn't kill her, I swear. As the officers led Emily back into the house, Evelyn turned to James, her expression grim. We're missing something, James. There are too many secrets, too many hidden agendas. We need to dig deeper. James nodded in agreement. The question is, where do we start? Everyone in this house seems to have a motive, and everyone's hiding something. Evelyn's gaze swept over the imposing facade of Ravenwood Manor, its windows like dark, watchful eyes. We start at the beginning, she said firmly. We go back through every statement, every piece of evidence. The truth is here somewhere, hidden in the shadows of this house. And we're going to find it, no matter what it takes. As they walked back to the manor, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The killer was still among them, and with each passing hour, the chance of them striking again grew. The race was on to uncover the truth before Ravenwood Manor claimed another victim. Chapter 7. Pieces of the Puzzle. As night fell over Ravenwood Manor, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, Evelyn and James found themselves back in the makeshift incident room. The walls were now covered with photos, timelines, and hastily scribbled notes. At the center of it all was a large family tree of the Ravenscroft clan, with red strings connecting various members to potential motives and pieces of evidence. Evelyn stood before the board, her eyes scanning the information for what felt like the 100th time. Okay, let's go over what we know, she said, running a hand through her disheveled hair. James nodded, flipping open his notebook. Lady Isabella Ravenscroft, found dead in her study. Cause of death, cyanide poisoning, likely administered through her evening tea. Right, Evelyn continued. We have multiple suspects, all with potential motives. Thomas Ravenscroft, estranged brother, passed over for control of the family business. Emily Ravenscroft, rebellious niece, felt trapped by her aunt's controlling nature. Arthur Bennett, private investigator hired to find the family treasure. Don't forget Margaret Lawson, James added, the loyal housekeeper who's been with the family for decades. She could have easily slipped the poison into Lady Isabella's tea. Evelyn nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. And then there's the matter of the hidden passages, the family crypt, and this supposed curse surrounding the Ravenscroft treasure. As they continued to discuss the case, a soft knock on the door interrupted their thoughts. It was Dr. Henry Clark, looking even more haggard than before. Detectives, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I've been going over Lady Isabella's medical records, and I've found something troubling. Evelyn gestured for him to continue, her interest piqued. It seems that Lady Isabella had been experiencing symptoms of low-level poisoning for weeks before her death, Dr. Clark explained. Headaches, nausea, dizziness. I had attributed it to stress, but now? James leaned forward, his pen poised over his notebook. Are you saying she was being poisoned gradually? Dr. Clark nodded grimly. It appears so. The final dose was just the culmination of a long-term plan. Evelyn's mind raced with this new information. This changes everything, she muttered. We're not looking for someone who acted on impulse. This was a calculated, long-term plot. Just then, another knock came at the door. This time, it was Margaret Lawson, her face pale and drawn. Detectives, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've remembered something. Something important. Evelyn guided the visibly shaken housekeeper to a chair. What is it, Mrs. Lawson? Margaret took a deep breath before speaking. A few weeks ago, I overheard Lady Isabella arguing with someone in her study. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard her say, "You can't do this. The curse will destroy us all." I thought she was just being dramatic, but now... James and Evelyn exchanged a significant look. Did you see who she was arguing with? James asked gently. Margaret shook her head. No, but I'm almost certain it was a man's voice she was responding to. As Margaret left the room, Evelyn turned to James, her eyes blazing with determination. We need to search Lady Isabella's study again. There has to be something we missed. They hurried to the study, now cordoned off with police tape. With gloved hands, they began a meticulous search, combing through every drawer, book, and crevice. It was James who found it, hidden behind a false panel in Lady Isabella's desk, a small, leather-bound diary. As they carefully flipped through the pages, their eyes widened at the contents. Evelyn, James breathed. This is it. Lady Isabella knew someone was trying to poison her. She was investigating it herself. Evelyn nodded, her heart racing. And look at this entry from a week before her death. He thinks I don't know, but I've seen through his plan. The treasure will remain hidden, the curse unbroken. I only hope I can stop him before it's too late. As they pored over the diary, piecing together Lady Isabella's final days, a sudden realization hit Evelyn. James, she said, her voice urgent. We've been looking at this all wrong. The murder wasn't just about greed or family disputes. It was about breaking the curse. James looked up, his eyes widening in understanding. And Lady Isabella was the key to keeping the curse intact. Evelyn nodded grimly. Which means our killer isn't just after money. They're desperate enough to risk everything, including a family curse, to get what they want. As the implications of their discovery sank in, a loud crash echoed through the manor, followed by a piercing scream. Evelyn and James exchanged a brief, alarmed look before rushing out of the study, their hearts pounding. The killer had struck again, and time was running out. Chapter 8. The second victim. The scream led Evelyn and James to the grand dining room, where they found Margaret Lawson standing over a lifeless body. It was Thomas Ravenscroft, his face contorted in agony, a half-empty glass of wine clutched in his hand. Thomas! Emily wailed, rushing to her uncle's side. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her hands shook as she reached out to touch him. Evelyn quickly knelt beside the body, checking for any signs of life. But it was clear that Thomas was beyond help. She turned to James, her expression grim. Get Dr. Clark. We need to confirm the cause of death. James nodded and hurried off, while Evelyn gently guided Emily away from the body. Emily, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me what happened? Emily's eyes were filled with tears, but she managed to speak. We were having dinner. Uncle Thomas seemed fine, but then he suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. I don't understand. Evelyn's mind raced. Another sudden death, so soon after Lady Isabella's. It couldn't be a coincidence. Did Thomas drink or eat anything unusual tonight? She asked. Emily shook her head, her tears flowing freely. No, just the usual wine. I poured it myself. Dr. Clark arrived moments later, his face pale as he examined Thomas's body. It's the same symptoms, he said quietly. Cyanide poisoning. Just like Lady Isabella. Evelyn's heart sank. The killer was still in the house, and they were getting bolder. James, she said, turning to her partner, we need to lock down the manor. No one leaves until we've questioned everyone again. As the police secured the manor and gathered everyone in the drawing room, Evelyn and James began their interviews, starting with Margaret Lawson. Mrs. Lawson, Evelyn said gently, did you notice anything unusual about Thomas's behavior tonight? Margaret shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. No, detective. He seemed his usual self. I can't believe this is happening. Evelyn nodded, her mind working overtime. What about the wine? Who had access to it? Margaret hesitated. The wine cellar is locked, but both Lady Isabella and Mr. Thomas had keys. Anyone could have taken a bottle without me knowing. Next, they spoke with Arthur Bennett, who looked visibly shaken by the recent events. Detectives, I swear I had nothing to do with this, he insisted. I was in my room, going over my notes. Evelyn studied him carefully. Did you find anything in your investigation that could be relevant to these murders? Arthur sighed, running a hand through his hair. Just more references to the family treasure and the curse. but nothing concrete. I was hoping Lady Isabella's diary would provide more clues. Finally, they turned to Emily, who was still in shock from her uncle's death. "Emily," James said gently, "we need to know if there's anything you haven't told us. Anything at all." Emily shook her head, her eyes red from crying. "I don't know anything more. I just want this nightmare to end." As they finished their interviews, Evelyn and James convened in the library, their minds heavy with the weight of the case. "We're missing something," Evelyn muttered, pacing the room. "Something crucial." James nodded, his expression troubled. "The killer is getting desperate. We need to figure out their endgame before they strike again." Evelyn's eyes fell on the family tree pinned to the wall, her mind racing through the connections and motives. "James," she said slowly, "what if the murders are about more than just the treasure? What if they're about control of the family legacy?" James frowned. "You mean someone wants to eliminate all potential heirs?" Evelyn nodded. "Exactly. With Lady Isabella and Thomas gone, who stands to inherit the Ravenscroft fortune?" James's eyes widened in realization. "Emily. She's the last direct heir." Evelyn's heart pounded. "We need to protect her. If the killer is targeting the heirs, Emily could be next." Chapter 9. Protecting the Heir. Evelyn and James found Emily in her room, sitting on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the wall. Evelyn approached her gently, sitting beside her. "Emily," she said softly, "we believe you might be in danger. We need to keep you safe until we catch the killer." Emily looked up, her eyes filled with fear. "Why would anyone want to kill me?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "We think the murders are about control of the family fortune. With Lady Isabella and Thomas gone, you're the last direct heir." Emily's face paled. "You think someone is trying to kill me for money?" Evelyn nodded. "It's a possibility. We need to be cautious. We'll have officers stationed outside your room, and you'll stay with us at all times." As they set up a protective detail for Emily, Evelyn and James continued to piece together the puzzle. They went over the diary again, looking for any clues they might have missed. "Look at this entry," James said, pointing to a passage. "Lady Isabella mentions a trusted confidant who knew about the treasure and the curse. Someone she thought she could trust?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Whoever this confidant is, they might be the key to solving the case. They decided to confront Dr. Clark, who had been close to Lady Isabella and might have known more than he let on. They found him in the library, poring over medical texts. "Dr. Clark," Evelyn began, "we need to ask you about Lady Isabella's confidant, someone she trusted with knowledge of the treasure and the curse." Dr. Clark looked up, his face pale. I don't know what you're talking about." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes piercing. "Doctor, we know you were close to Lady Isabella. If you know anything, now is the time to tell us." Dr. Clark sighed, his shoulders slumping. "All right. Lady Isabella confided in me about the treasure and the curse. She was convinced that someone in the family was trying to find it, and she feared for her life." James leaned forward. "Did she ever mention who she suspected?" Dr. Clark shook his head. "No, she was too cautious. But she did say that the key to finding the treasure was hidden in plain sight, within the manor itself." Evelyn's mind raced. Hidden in plain sight. Could it be something we've overlooked? As they pondered this new information, a sudden commotion outside the library drew their attention. They rushed out to find one of the officers, pale and breathless. "Detectives," he gasped. "It's Emily. She's gone." Chapter 10. The Final Confrontation. Panic surged through Evelyn as she and James raced to Emily's room. The door was ajar, and the room was empty, the window wide open. "She must have climbed out," James said, scanning the grounds below. Evelyn's heart pounded. "We need to find her before the killer does." They split up, searching the manor and its extensive grounds. Evelyn's mind raced with possibilities, her instincts guiding her through the darkened corridors. As she approached the old wing of the manor, a faint sound caught her attention. She followed it, her flashlight cutting through the gloom, until she reached a heavy wooden door. It creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the depths of the manor. Evelyn descended cautiously, her senses on high alert. The air grew colder, and the walls closed in around her as she reached the bottom of the stairs. There, in the dim light, she saw Emily, standing before an ancient-looking door, her face pale and determined. "Emily," Evelyn called softly, stepping forward. "What are you doing down here?" Emily turned, her eyes wide with fear. "I had to find it, detective. The treasure. It's the only way to end this nightmare." Before Evelyn could respond, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It was Arthur Bennett, his face twisted with desperation. "Stay back, detective," he warned, brandishing a small vial. "I can't let you interfere." Evelyn's heart raced as she realized the truth. "Arthur, you're the one behind the murders. You poisoned Lady Isabella and Thomas." Arthur's eyes blazed with madness. "They were standing in the way. The treasure belongs to me. I was hired to find it, and I will. The curse is just a myth." Evelyn stepped closer, her voice steady. "Arthur, this isn't the way. You don't have to do this." Arthur laughed bitterly. "It's too late for that. Emily knows the truth now. She has to die." As he lunged toward Emily, Evelyn acted on instinct, tackling him to the ground. The vial shattered, its contents spilling harmlessly onto the stone floor. They struggled, but Evelyn's training and determination gave her the upper hand. She managed to subdue Arthur, pinning him down until James arrived with backup. Emily stood trembling, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, detective. I thought I was going to die." Evelyn helped her to her feet, her heart still pounding. "You're safe now, Emily. It's over." Chapter 11. Unraveling the Mystery. With Arthur Bennett in custody, the pieces of the puzzle finally began to fall into place. Evelyn and James spent the next few days piecing together the full extent of Arthur's plan. Arthur had been hired by Thomas Ravenscroft to find the family treasure, but his greed had driven him to extreme measures. He had discovered the hidden passages and the family crypt, and when Lady Isabella began to suspect him, he had poisoned her to silence her. Thomas had become the next obstacle, and Arthur had eliminated him in the same way, all while manipulating Emily into believing she was in danger from the family curse. As they reviewed the evidence, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something missing. She returned to the hidden passage, retracing her steps to the family crypt. There, she found the small chest with the letters, and something caught her eye, a hidden compartment within the chest. Inside, she found an old, weathered map detailing the layout of Ravenwood Manor and marking the location of the treasure. It was hidden in the one place no one had thought to look, the grand fireplace in the drawing room. With the help of a few officers, they carefully dismantled the fireplace, revealing a hidden chamber filled with gold, jewels, and priceless artifacts. The Ravenscroft treasure, untouched for centuries, was finally uncovered. Chapter 12. A New Beginning. With the case solved and the treasure recovered, Ravenwood Manor began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Emily, now the sole heir to the Ravenscroft fortune, decided to use the wealth to restore the manor and create a foundation in her aunt's name, dedicated to preserving history and helping those in need. Evelyn and James stood on the front steps of the manor, watching as the sun set over the rolling hills. The air was filled with a sense of closure and new beginnings. "You did it, Evelyn," James said, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You solved the mystery of Ravenwood Manor." Evelyn shook her head, her eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "We did it, James. Together. And now, maybe we can finally get some rest." As they walked back to their car, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The enigma of Ravenwood Manor had been unraveled, and justice had been served. But more importantly, a family torn apart by greed and secrets had been given a chance to heal and start anew. And as they drove away from the manor, Evelyn knew that no matter what mysteries lay ahead, she and James would face them together, ready to uncover the truth, no matter where the trail might lead.
Subscribe for more.